Welcome back to the Driving Line YouTube channel. Today's project is transforming all of the mix-match colored body panels that we have on this car into one cohesive color, and that color is going to be our Vinyl Frog Miami Blue wrap. As you can see, we have the Z06 front bumper on. This was actually pretty easy, just taking it off, putting on the new one. You do have to modify a few things, but most of the things line up pretty well. And even though this is a base C6, we still got the fenders to line up here. The key thing to note here is that you will need to go ahead and put bolts at the end. Now these are made for a factory wide body car, and these are base C6 fenders. So you do have to get a little creative, and of course the body gaps aren't totally perfect, but this will be somewhat covered by our wide body fenders from 945 Garage. We have fenders in white, we have body in black, and we have a bumper in red. All of this by the end of this video will be Miami Blue, which will really start to bring things all together. You might be thinking to yourself, wow, Jacob, you and Papa really know how to wrap a car after putting in an angle kit, seats, harness, a welded roll cage. We don't. This is gonna be our first time ever. We've been looking up YouTube videos and tutorials as well, but we're gonna take you guys along with us because we wanna show that pretty much anyone out there who has a garage with a couple of hand tools, you guys can do this yourself. So we're gonna be taking this car, which was a total hoopty when we started, give it a full run through, and now we're gonna transform it completely. What we've seen online is most people start with the hood because it is the smoothest and flattest area to learn on. So we're gonna start here. We do have those vents we gotta work around, but this should be simple. Then we'll start with all the other easy panels like the halo, the back hatch, maybe some doors. And then at the very end, we'll go ahead and graduate to the front and rear bumper because they have the most curves, they have possibilities of inlays, and those are all the things we're gonna be learning along the way. Let's go ahead and get started on the wrap. The first thing we gotta do, because it's been sitting, is wipe down the panel we're about to wrap, which is this bad boy right here. This is our wrap from Vinyl Frog, and as you guys can see, that Miami Blue is going to really pop against the yellow here, and that is all what we have in the vision. You guys can check out Vinyl Frog. They have a ton of different colors, and I'm a big Porsche fanboy, so I had to go with the Miami Blue, but they have other Porsche colors like chalk, and they've got Ruby Star and things like that. But this is really gonna pop, especially once we add on our other decals. But without further ado, let's go ahead and cut this out and put it on the hood and see this start to turn blue. We are now a couple evenings and our first full work day on wrapping the car in, and I want to share a couple of the tips and tricks that we've learned along the way. Now, by no means are we professionals. Now, I've had other cars wrapped, but that was done by a shop. This is our first time ever taking this on, and I want to just show you guys some of the problem areas that we've had and just some of the tips and tricks, like I said, we've learned along the way. Now, again, this is just two guys in a garage trying to figure this out. We are not professionals, so if you guys have any tips, leave them down below because I'm sure we'll be wrapping some other cars in the future. As we mentioned, this is Vinyl Frog's Miami Blue, and when I first unwrapped it, I thought it might be a little darker than I anticipated, but as it starts getting laid out, it really pops. We started with the hood because most people start there. It's the smoothest, flattest, and widest, but that still presented some challenges, what is called glassing, which we had to learn in that, and then we had to get down into those grooves. This may not seem like a huge body line, but it is a potential area of lifting. After that, we did our first cuts and figured out how to trim everything and wrap around the edges. After we did that, we moved to the fender. Now you might be looking and going, well, the fender's not fully wrapped. That's because we have all of these over fenders that we still need to wrap as well. This is wrapped for the only visible section when those fenders are applied. Now, we did learn a little bit about curves, we learned a little bit about knifeless tape, and you can see some seams here. We also learned that you can actually make an L shape here, but this all just comes from experience. The halo and hatch were really easy because again, those are pretty smooth, wide sections. The halo took us no time at all just because it's so flat here. But when we came into this side, this has more visible section even when the fender is applied. So again, all of this you won't see, but you will see this top line. We did an insert using the knifeless tape on the door card. This was a huge learning experience because one, it stretches down deep into this curve, and this is a pretty significant curve, which could present challenges with lifting if you don't use heat. You want to be very careful not to overheat the wrap though, because you can go too far. And once you've done that, you've pretty much destroyed that section. Luckily, this is a small section. We only had one mess up here, but it was a huge learning curve about how to use heat when you're wrapping your car. I had to do that because as you can see, when the door is closed, you can see quite a bit of that. But when it's fully closed, you really don't see any other seam. Up next, we're gonna be tackling these doors, which will really transform a lot of the car because things are kind of pieced together now, but once this thing is fully blue, it's really gonna pop. Let's go ahead and dive into that. Now have the front two fenders done thanks to the help of my buddy, and these are actually pretty difficult to hold on to because they slide around. They're not actually mounted to the car. That would be really easy. Instead, I was on this workbench wrestling with it and it was moving around. The biggest thing that we did here was we took our learnings and did inlays for these vents so that way we didn't have to press down and have a lift here in this corner. Other than that, it laid down pretty much like any other panel. Now, as you can see with the reflection, it is not perfect. This is not perfect, and you guys have to remember this is our first time ever wrapping a vehicle. This project was quite the undertaking. We're literally taking a base C6 that was a hoopty, tons of things wrong with it, and fully redoing it and getting it drift ready. There's gonna be so many visual layers to this that it's going to distract you from any of the flaws you might see. You know, these are the things that we're learning about: wrapping edges, going around curves, things like that. But the whole purpose of this is to show that anyone out there can totally transform a car and take on a new domain of racing if that's what you want to do. We still have the rear fenders here, and these will be easier because there aren't any vents that we have to inlay. What I have found is that these significant dips, like this curve for the wide body, that is what ultimately gives you the trouble because you have to stretch into that curve, or you actually have to set there and stretch around the fender. I'm gonna hold off on these until I have an extra set of hands because you do have to stretch and pull those around the fenders with significant force, which is called glassing. Now, I should have taken my own advice because as you're seeing in that first clip, I completely failed doing the rear fender with it on the workbench. After I realized this, I went ahead and mounted it with two of the existing M5 bolts, and then I was able to stretch it and wrap it no problem. You'll also see that I elected to do the rear bumper piece in 3 sections, and this was just to make our lives easier because I didn't really care about any seams. We now have the rear fenders installed, and I'm actually making a pivot because I want to change how these fenders are mounted. As you guys have seen in the past, I have used these well nuts, which I touted as being really perfect because they're rubber, they have a little bit of give for it, and we don't have to worry too much about ever removing it later. But what I have found is that because this is handmade in fiberglass, and this is trying to be mounted to it, and each car is a little bit different, we're just not getting our clamping force. So what I did was I ordered the M5 riv nuts, which are these brass ones here. These are steel, zinc plated. We shouldn't have any rusting issues. What I ordered were the same size, or I thought, as these M5 well nuts. Well, the well nuts actually use a bigger hole. That means that all of these M5 riv nuts will not work. So I'm moving up to M6 hardware, which I have on the way, and that's when I can fully mount up the body panel. Originally, I thought curvy cars were actually going to be easier, but it turns out they're tough because you have to stretch into all of those curves. So that rear wide body being extra wide and extra curvy, that kind of made it difficult for a first timer, and no pun intended, but there was a steep learning curve, and we had to use heat, we had to stretch it, we had to know how to clean the panel, and what I used this time was tack reducer. This little guy right here is some secret sauce that helps so that way you can lift and reposition wrap over and over again. And this is honestly a game changer for a newbie like me because I had to do what's called glassing. And when you do that, sometimes it gets extra stuck and then you end up overstretching the film. Overstretching a film almost ruins the film. The properties, the way that it sticks down, it starts to just kind of go out the window. So highly recommend some tack reducer if you're going to be learning and doing this on your own. By no means is this meant to scare anybody from doing this. Just take your time and allocate about double the time you actually thought you would need to be able to wrap an entire car, especially one with curvy wide body panels. Now just for fun, I lightly placed the fenders on there with only like 2 screws holding it in until we do those riv nut upgrades, but I just had to put this together to get the full blue effect before we put on the livery. I'm actually mind blown that I'm able to accomplish this because high school me would have never thought this was possible. I would see wrapped cars on the road and just think those people must have unlimited money or something like that. But nowadays there's so many resources on YouTube. Really, you can go out there and do this. And all the wrap was about 600 bucks. So you can do all of this in your own garage by taking your time, change the entire look of your vehicle for only about 600 bucks. And this is one of my favorite colors ever because if I were to ever get a GT3 or a GT3 RS, I'd probably have it in Miami blue on white wheels. This thing is coming along beautifully and I'm so stoked on how close it's coming along to the render that we have. And I just can't wait to throw on the livery. It's gonna hide a little bit of my imperfections, maybe my original bubbles or creases, and it's just gonna be so visually stimulating. It's gonna totally bring out that Japanese-inspired drift car. We covered a lot in this video, including transforming the entire car from 3 different colors to that Vinyl Frog Miami Blue. Be sure to subscribe to the Driving Line YouTube channel if you're not already, and stay tuned for the next video where we're going to completely transform the car even more by adding the Japanese-inspired livery and getting this thing ready for the track. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, then please comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys next time.
Thanks for watching. I'm Lauren Healy, Team Noto driver and off-road racing champion. Driving Line brings you weekly episodes and series, so hit subscribe. Don't miss the next video with more automotive content that fuels you. We'll see you out there.